The first thing I saw when I pulled into my driveway was a man in a neon vest spraying orange paint across the gravel I had owned for 9 years. The second thing I saw was my neighbor, Elaine Mercer, standing beside him in white sneakers and a navy raincoat, holding a paper coffee cup like she was there to approve a school renovation. And the third thing I heard was her saying, "Just keep the line straight, this side will be shared access." I got out of my truck so fast I left the engine running. "Mom," I said, loud enough for the whole crew to hear, "what exactly do you think you're doing on my property?" Elaine turned slowly, not startled, not embarrassed, just mildly annoyed that I had interrupted her little project. "Evan," she said, with that smile people use when they are about to explain your own life to you, "we are improving the entrance situation." I looked down at the paint cutting across my gravel driveway, then at the stack of concrete edging stones near the road. "My entrance situation." She took a sip of coffee. "The neighborhood entrance situation. The driveway between our houses is awkward, and this will make it flow better for everyone." There was one problem with that sentence. Actually, there was several, but the biggest was that there was no shared driveway, no neighborhood committee, no agreement, and no chance in hell I'd given her permission to build anything on my land. Back then, our little stretch outside Cedar Hollow, Ohio, was quiet in the way people mean when they say they are lucky. Nobody cared if your porch light stayed on too late, nobody filed complaints over garbage cans, and if somebody needed a ladder or a socket wrench, they knocked on your door instead of posting about it online. I ran a small tree and landscaping business from home, nothing fancy, just me, my old Ford, a trailer, 2 steady guys during busy season, and a long gravel driveway that made it easy to load equipment before sunrise. That driveway mattered to me more than people understood. It was where I built my business, where I taught my nephew how to back up a trailer without jackknifing it, where old Mr. Benson from across the street used to sit in a folding chair and tell me I was working too hard. It was mine, plain and simple, and for nearly a decade, nobody had ever questioned that. Then the Mercers moved in next door. Elaine and her husband Grant arrived from somewhere outside Columbus in matching SUVs, both so clean they looked nervous sitting near a gravel road. Elaine introduced herself before the movers had unloaded their first couch. She looked at my work truck, looked at the trailer, then looked at me and said, "So you are the one running the commercial operation." I remember laughing because I thought she was joking. She was not. Over the next few weeks, she started leaving typed notes in mailboxes about lawn presentation, outdoor storage, dog noise, recycling bin placement, things nobody had complained about in 20 years. Grant was quieter, but he had this habit of walking around their front yard with a measuring wheel, staring at curbs and fences like he had been hired to inspect the whole county. Then came the cones. 2 bright orange cones appeared one afternoon, right on the edge of my driveway. I moved them back into their yard. The next morning they were back, farther in this time. When I knocked on their door, Grant gave me a smile that did not reach his eyes. "We have guests often," he said. "It would make sense for that section to function as shared access." I told him, "It makes sense for you to park on your own property." That smile disappeared so fast it was almost impressive. After that, I found little survey flags in the gravel, chalk marks near the road, and Elaine pacing outside with a clipboard, studying my driveway like she was planning an invasion. I should have taken those signs more seriously, because 3 days later, I came home to orange paint, a construction crew, and Elaine Mercer trying to redraw my property line without asking me a single question. I walked straight past Elaine and told the crew to stop, but the foreman only looked more uncomfortable, like he had just realized he'd been dropped into a fight nobody had warned him about. Elaine stepped between us, not aggressively, not at first, just with the polished little calm she used whenever she wanted to sound reasonable while saying something completely insane. "Evan, there is no need to make a scene," she said. I looked at the orange paint, then at the men holding shovels on my driveway. "You hired a construction crew to mark my land. I think the scene got here before I did." Grant came out of the house wearing loafers and a quarter-zip sweater, carrying a folder under one arm like he had been waiting for his entrance. He said they had reviewed the neighborhood layout and determined that the strip along my driveway was underutilized. Underutilized. That was the word he picked. Not disputed, not unclear, not shared. Just underutilized, like my property was an empty shelf at a store, and they had decided to put something on it. I asked him what exactly gave him the right to determine anything about my land. He tapped the folder and said, "We have measurements." I said, "From who?" He paused for a second, then said, "From us." That was when I understood this was not some misunderstanding that could be settled over a fence with a handshake. They had convinced themselves that wanting something badly enough was the same thing as owning it. I pulled my phone out and started recording. Elaine immediately raised a hand toward her face. "You are not allowed to film me." I said, "I am standing in my driveway and you are standing on my driveway, so I think I am allowed to do whatever I need to do." The foreman shifted his weight and finally asked Grant whether they had a permit. Grant looked at Elaine. Elaine looked at him, and for one brief second I saw the whole thing crack. Not collapse, not yet, but crack. Then Elaine smiled again and said, "This is a small residential improvement. We were told permits were not necessary." I asked who told her that. She did not answer. Instead, she turned to the crew and said, "Please continue." I stepped closer, close enough that the foreman could hear me clearly. "I am the property owner. I do not consent to any work on this land. If you keep going, I will call the county and the police." That did it. The crew stopped. One of the younger guys put his shovel down and looked like he wanted to disappear into the truck. Elaine's face changed then. Not dramatically, but enough. The polite neighbor mask slipped just a little. "You are being selfish," she said. "This would benefit the whole street." I laughed because I honestly did not know what else to do. "The whole street," I said. "You mean you and Grant? You two moved here 6 weeks ago and decided the rest of us need permission to use our own yards." Grant stiffened. "There are standards, Evan. There are county records," I told him. "Those matter more." They sent the crew away that day, but it was not because they admitted they were wrong. It was because they had run out of ways to act right in front of witnesses. I thought maybe the embarrassment would cool them down. Instead, it lit something under Elaine. The next morning, I found a letter taped to my front door with the words "Cedar Hollow Community Standards." Notice printed across the top in blue ink. It said my landscaping trailer created visual clutter, that my work truck disrupted the residential character of the street, and that I had 7 days to correct the violations. At the bottom was a number for questions. It was Elaine's cell phone number. I stood there holding that piece of paper and felt something in me go quiet. Not calm exactly, just clear. She was not trying to improve the neighborhood. She was trying to build a little kingdom where she got to decide who belonged and who did not. And my truck, my driveway, my ordinary working life, all of it reminded her that she did not control everything around her. I called a few neighbors that afternoon. By dinner, I had learned Elaine had left notices on 3 other doors too. Mrs. Hamney got one because her bird feeder was visible from the street. The Rilleys got one because their teenage daughter kept a basketball hoop near the garage. Old Mr. Benson got one because his porch swing looked, and I am quoting this exactly, weathered beyond community standards. He laughed when he showed it to me, then stopped laughing when he saw how serious I was. "That woman is going to get herself in trouble," he said. I told him I thought she already had. A few days passed, and the neighborhood got tense in that strange, quiet way. Small places do when everyone knows there is trouble, but nobody wants to be the first person to say it out loud. Elaine started walking the block with a clipboard every evening. Grant began parking his SUV right up against the edge of my gravel, almost daring me to say something. Then one Friday, I came home from a job in the next county and found fresh asphalt running from their driveway into mine. 10 feet, maybe 12, smooth and black, cutting across the gravel like a scar. They had waited until I was gone, brought in a different crew, and paved the connection anyway. Elaine was standing beside it with a plastic cup of iced coffee, smiling like she had just unveiled a new patio. Grant leaned against his garage with his arms folded. I got out of the truck slowly because I knew if I moved too fast, I was going to say something I could not take back. Elaine opened her arms toward the asphalt and said, "Now you can see the vision." I looked at the pavement, then at the decorative stones they had lined along the edge, then at the small brass path lights already stuck into my gravel. "You paved over my property," I said. Grant shook his head. "We improved the shared access point." I walked to my truck, pulled out my deed, the survey map I had received when I bought the house, and the county parcel printout I had saved years earlier. I held them out toward Elaine. "Read these." She did not even touch them. "Grant measured everything," she said. I stared at her. "Grant measured what?" She pointed toward the asphalt. "The boundary. He was very thorough. Grant actually nodded like that was supposed to settle it." I looked at him and said, "You used a tape measure?" He said, "It is contractor grade." I do not know what expression was on my face, but Elaine must have seen it because she gave me that tired little sigh again. Evan, you are making this much harder than it needs to be. That was the moment I stopped hoping they would come to their senses. I went inside, sat at my kitchen table with every document spread out in front of me, and called my cousin Mara, who worked as a paralegal for a property attorney in Dayton. She listened without interrupting, then said, "Do not touch the asphalt. Do not threaten them. Take pictures of everything, save every notice, and call a lawyer Monday morning." I asked her if I was overreacting. There was a long pause before she answered. "Evan, they built on your land and invented an HOA to justify it. You are not overreacting. You are late." So that night I walked outside with a flashlight and started documenting every inch of the mess. The new pavement, the lights, the stones, the fake notice on my door, the cones they had dragged back out by the road. Elaine watched me from behind her curtains for a while, and stepped outside in her robe and said, "What are you doing?" I kept taking pictures. "Getting ready," I told her. She folded her arms. "For what?" I looked up at her, and for the first time since she moved in, I did not feel angry. I felt steady. "For you to explain all of this to someone who actually has authority." By Monday morning, I had hired an attorney named Lila Garner, a woman with silver hair, reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of calm voice that made you feel like your problem had already been reduced to a stack of manageable paperwork. She spread my deed, survey map, photos, fake notices, and video clips across her conference table, then spent about 10 minutes looking through county records. When she finally leaned back, she did not smile, but I could tell she was trying not to. "Evan," she said, "there is no HOA registered in your subdivision. There is no easement across your driveway, and that new asphalt is entirely on your parcel." I asked what that meant for Elaine and Grant. Leela looked at the photos of the path lights and said, "It means they made a very expensive mistake. We sent them a formal demand that afternoon, asking them to stop using the driveway, remove the paving and landscaping, and preserve all records related to the work." Elaine responded with a 3-page letter on something called Cedar Hollow Community Council letterhead, claiming they had acted in the interest of neighborhood safety and aesthetic unity. Lila read it once, placed it face down on her desk, and said, "Well, that is going to make this easier." Instead of backing down, Elaine doubled down. 2 days later, I came home to find a new wooden privacy fence running almost 8 feet onto my side of the line, with fresh concrete at the posts and a small bronze sign near the gate that read Mercer Shared Access. I stood there for a long time, not yelling, not pacing, just looking at it. There is a point when somebody pushes so far past common sense that anger stops being useful. You start to see them clearly. Elaine did not want a driveway. She wanted proof that she could take something from me and make me accept it. So I stopped giving her the reaction she wanted. I called Lila. I called the county, and I kept documenting. Then I called my mulch supply. That Friday morning, a dump truck rolled down our street carrying 12 yards of hardwood mulch for a landscaping job I actually had scheduled the following week. I met the driver at the edge of my property and pointed to the fresh asphalt where Elaine had connected our driveways. "Right there," I said. He looked at the pavement, then at the survey stakes Lila had arranged to have installed the day before. "You sure?" I nodded. "That is my land." Elaine came out before the truck even lifted its bed. She was wearing a red jacket, holding a phone, and moving so fast she nearly tripped on her own front step. "You cannot dump that there," she shouted. "That is shared access." I said, "No, Elaine, it is my driveway." The truck tipped, and the mulch poured down in one long brown wave, covering the asphalt connection from edge to edge. It was not dramatic in the movie sense. No thunder, no crowd cheering, just the heavy sound of wood chips hitting pavement while Elaine stood there realizing that every fake rule she had written down could not move 1 inch of something I legally placed on my own land. She called the sheriff. I was glad she did. The deputy arrived, checked the survey stakes, reviewed my deed, listened to Elaine explain that her neighborhood council had approved the connection, then looked at her for a long moment and said, "Ma'am, a council that does not legally exist cannot give you permission to build on somebody else's property." Grant tried to argue that they had measured everything carefully. The deputy asked who performed the survey. Grant said, "I did." The deputy asked if he was licensed. Grant looked at the ground. That was the first time I saw Elaine truly panic. The court hearing happened 3 weeks later. Elaine represented herself wearing a cream blazer and carrying a thick binder labeled Community Standards Evidence. Grant sat beside her, quiet for once. Lila presented the deed, the certified survey, the photos, the notices, the contractor invoice, and the county records showing there had never been an HOA. When the judge asked Elaine why she believed she had authority over my driveway, she said, "We were trying to improve the neighborhood." The judge looked at her and said, "Mrs. Mercer, improving a neighborhood does not begin with taking your neighbor's land." And you ruled in my favor. They had to remove the fence, tear out the asphalt, take down the lights, restore the gravel, and pay my legal fees. A month later, I watched the same type of crew break apart the pavement Elaine had been so proud of. Grant stood by the garage with his hands in his pockets. Elaine sat on her porch and did not say a word. When the last piece of asphalt was gone, she walked over to me and said almost softly, "I thought you were being difficult." I looked at the empty stretch of driveway between our houses and said, "No, Elaine, I was being clear." 2 months after that, the Mercers put their house on the market. The neighborhood got quiet again, the good kind of quiet. And every time I pull my truck into that driveway now, I still think about how close I came to letting somebody make me doubt what was mine. So tell me this, because I still wonder about it sometimes. Was I right to block that illegal driveway connection with mulch, or did I take things too far once I knew I had the law on my side? Leave your honest opinion in the comments, and if you have ever dealt with a neighbor who confused control with community, share your story and subscribe for more.